Good morning, everyone. Today I'm going to begin with a two-part series, Thoth Speaks, the Great Pyramid and Hall of Records. On this first video is a question and answer session with Thoth that was given by me with him in 1983. And so we begin. The first question: was the Great Pyramid of Giza built by your architecture and cosmic guidance and under your authority? The answer: the original repository wherein was contained the Tallis, or ocular records inscribed on gemstone, had lain undefiled since before the ages of Lemuria and Atlantis, before the falling of the veil, when the earth was in the light forest. This is the original repository first he's talking about. Now, the light forest was a term he used to use way back then, which later he began calling the lotus reality. As I move forward in time with Thoth from way back then until now, he often updates terminology to comply with new information that he's very judiciously given to me that broadens the spectrum, that broadens the picture. It's his MO not to give me the whole enchilada right at the beginning. We're talking about a lifetime of work here that I've been doing. In over 50 years now, he has expanded my understanding and areas in which he's allowed me to see. I say allowed me in regard to his Akashic record, which is under his domain. And as he expands that territory, he will update, in many instances, not all, but in many instances, the vocabulary and how he states it, what he calls it, etc. Now, you could say this could be confusing. Well, it really isn't so much, because it's only been in very key places that he's done this. And when he does it, it has a very succinct connection to what he's called it before. So he's not changing what it is. He's just saying, okay, let's call it this now, because I want to include a greater understanding of it. And in that understanding, this is a better terminology to use. Okay, so back to light forest. So light forest is now being called the lotus reality, the unfallen realm. So he's saying this original repository was actually created during the time of the lotus reality. It would have had to have been on the tail end of it for sure, but it was in that period. Now, he continues to say in 1983, I, the Thoth, recorder of the age, did employ forces of the earth and heaven in the lifting of the pedestal, pyramid, great pyramid here, above the repository, and all about the chamber did I honeycomb the earth, so that the sacred hive might thrive unto the coming darkness. At this time, and in ages afterward, other records were laid in adjoining chambers beneath the pedestal, along with many precious things of civilizations among the stars, within and on the earth. So here he's speaking of the many chambers underneath the pyramid. He's talking about it as a honeycomb. That means a lot of chambers. And it's not necessarily that all of these chambers were filled with marvelous things. You have to understand that there's a maze, a matrix being set into place. Hollow space with earth, hollow space with earth. And it's like a sacred geometry pattern. So it holds an energy presence just in and of itself, the space and the earth. And then, of course, there are places where things were placed. Objects, actual objects, and information. But these tallis, they're not like you can sit there and read them if you know the language. It's an energy inscription. It would go directly into the brain-mind complex. It would open up the whole circuitry. It's an awareness factor. It would give you information, but on a much higher level of receipt than reading something of the language that we created. These are fire-lettered languages that go directly into the system. So to continue with the 1983 questioning, I ask, is the original repository containing the Tallis the same as what is known as the Hall of Records? Thoth states, they are not wholly the same. While the Kapha, or original repository, is often identified as such, it is a separate chamber from the long hall, the Hall of Inscriptions, that is in truth a tunnel or hallway, and not a cell, as is the Kapha. The Hall of Inscriptions was constructed under my authority and contains numerous records of history and the mystery of life. It reaches from the paws of the lion, Sphinx, to the innermost chamber, the Kapha. The records within the Kapha are beyond present normal comprehension. That's what I was speaking about, the direct brainwave thing. They remain there for the return of the guardians. They contain signal codes for the repositioning of the earth within the heavens. Whoa, okay, let's take a look at these two sentences. They remain there for the return of the guardians. Well, now I would call them the Companions of Horus, which is mentioned in the pyramid texts. I didn't know about that when I wrote this way back in 1983. Now I do, and I did ask Thoth if they were one and the same, and he agreed that they were. Although I did not know he made this statement here in 1983. I couldn't remember that, but I knew that he would refer to guardians and whatever, and I wanted to get that cleared, and he said yes, they are one and the same. So here I see they're even mentioned as long ago as 1983. Now, these Tallis, or these tablets that are in the Kapha, or the original repository, contain signal codes for the repositioning of the earth within the heavens. This would be, as far as I'm concerned so far, unless that's something is even further back that I'm not aware of in the material, the first mention, most likely, of the new Earth star and the whole ascension process. The repositioning of the earth within the heavens. Now, this line, I've not read since 1983. I read it now, or just a few minutes ago, and I see that that is what he's referring to, even that far back, because it wasn't until probably 1990. I don't have the text in front of me to verify this. 1989, 1990, somewhere in there, that he began talking about the ascended earth, and he didn't call it the new Earth star then. He called it something else. Again, we're referring to this updating of terminology. And just a year or two after that, he presented it as the new Earth star. He said what we were calling the so-and-so, and he referred to that. We are now going to be calling the new Earth star. And then he gave me all this information, not all that I have now, but all in on, this new Earth star. So what he's saying here is this original repository and the records within it, they remain there for the return of the guardians. They contain signal codes for the repositioning of the earth within the heavens. Now, that opens a whole nother thing that I probably shouldn't be even looking at right now, because we want to get on with this. But I know at least from Thoth's material, that the Pyramid of Giza, what we call the Pyramid of Giza, the Temple of the Lion, the Temple of the Morning Star, both those names were used in ancient times. I'm sorry, not the Temple of the Morning Star, the Temple of the Risen One. The Morning Star is the etheric level of the Temple of the Risen One. But anyway, the Pyramid of Giza is when the last button is pressed, so to speak, on the ascension of this earth, and this earth falls away, and the new, won't fall away instantly, but the new earth is risen into that state and consciousness of humanity. that Pyramid of Giza will not be going with us. It is an engine. It is the last retro engine for the whole process, is within the codes within that pyramid. So, of course, that means underneath it as well, the whole complex. So this would be aligning to that. But these this original repository with the Kapha codes would have to be connected directly to the vault of Osiris in the honeycomb chambers, or at least beneath the pyramid, because that in the vault of Osiris, Osiris does his Kachina dance, starfire dance, as Thoth calls it. That is the ascending principle there, the dynamic, the quantum dynamic for this release. So this repository would have to be positioned energetically, probably physically, either within the vault of Thoth or beneath it or near it in some way. This I've not gotten into with Thoth yet, and I'm not going to go in right now because, gosh, we've got more to talk about here. But this is just something I'm saying aside. So the next question in 1983 was, how was the Great Pyramid built? The Great Temple of the Line, he's referring to it as in one of its terminologies there, was raised through the knowledge of acroneumetics. It is a process of building with light energy or photonics. A grid is first constructed of photons trapped in magnetic triangles. Once the photon mass is sequentialized and brought to bonding with the magna wave, matter particles are transferred from the gravis or matter source to the pattern of the light waves within the grid. The structure must then set, as it is for a time, in a plastic condition. Once firm, it is polished by lasers from copper shields. Then I ask, please explain the gravis or matter source. So a matter source a matrix of material which is loosened from its atomic bonding so that it is holographically transferable to the photonic grid. The question, please give brief statement on the later reconstructions of the Giza pyramid. Before I get into that, I do need to address something I was not aware of then, that there were two incarnations of the Thoth and the same soul, the same Thoth soul, that worked on this pyramid. The first was Thoth Muzurud, who came directly from the Blue Star Rigel, and this was prior to the time tsunami that leveled Atlantis and the whole thing that began this whole new chapter of Earth. That was Thoth Muzurud. And he was the one that brought the codes, the blueprints, for the construction of many of the ancient monoliths today, but especially the pyramids, plural, all on the Pyramid of Giza and a little beyond. Some of the others were there as well. But we're focusing now on the Pyramid of Giza and its companion pyramids there on the Giza Plateau. And so he brought that blueprint, which was organized as a table, an emerald table. And in a physical form, this table contains the tablets, little squares or whatever. I don't know if they're square, but pieces that go into this table. And when you put them all together, like circuitry, you have a computer. So that's Thoth Muzurud. So he brought those templates. He was the one that was, the organizer, the architect, shall we say, of the Giza Plateau pyramids. They were built under his supervision. Now, just prior to the sinking of Atlantis, Thoth Muzurud reincarnated as Thoth Racemus of Afra. He was born in Tibet, came over to Atlantis, was getting all set and ready for this next stage, and there were a lot of things involved, including the Ark of On and all of this. But when the time tsunami hit, Thoth Racemus of Afra was ready to reconstruct the pyramids of Giza. They weren't completely demolished by any means, but they were underwater and things happened, and he was there to reconstruct them. And so now we're at the reconstructing point. But see, none of this was given to me at the time. As far as I knew, this was one Thoth, Thoth Racimus Vafra. That was the beginning of the story and the end of the story. He didn't say that, not at all, but that's what I assumed, because that's all he was talking to me about here. So again, I'm asking him to give a statement on the later reconstructions of the Giza pyramid. And he states, the Temple of the Lion has been reworked on its surface stone 3 times hence. It has been rebuilt from its 5th layer of 7 to the surface stone 1 time. The interior has been realigned once with certain changes to the light shafts to compensate for the Earth's disalignment, or misalignment, maybe it should be. In the later reconstructions, modifications of the original building process were employed. As a drought, well, I'm going to stop there for a moment because this next line is very significant too. See, if you're talking about how they were able to build it in the first place through this liquid motion gravis thing with the holographs, reconstructing it, changing where the shafts are, moving them over, whatever, would be very easy compared to what it would be if you're working with stone. You'd have to take the whole thing down and start over again, right? But that's not how they did it. So that's why they could do all this. Oh, we changed this, we moved the shafts over, we did that and that. No problemo. But of course now it would be. So the next line is very significant, and I want to read it carefully. As a drought presses the earth dry on the banks of the Nile, so the full understanding of the great temple and its cosmic architecture receded from the ancient people and their children under the Egyptian sun. Now, I thought he was speaking here very symbolically. And perhaps on one level he was, obviously. It was a drought presses the earth dry on the banks of the Nile, so the full understanding of the great temple and its cosmic architecture receded from the ancient people and their children under the Egyptian sun. Yes, it's symbolic and makes sense, right, in a symbolic statement. However, now I'm looking at it, now in 2018, with all the discoveries that have been made underneath the pyramid and the fact that now they know how significant water played in the mechanism of the structure. They're already beginning, some scientists, pseudoscientists, whatever, are beginning to look at that, and they're certainly not the traditional Egyptologists, but the others. And they're saying, look at this, there was water under here, there was all this water. And this somehow interplayed with the mechanism of the Great Pyramid and the others as well. So looking at it from the present view, as a drought pressed the earth dry on the banks of the Nile, so the full understanding of the great temple and its cosmic architecture receded from the ancient people and their children under the Egyptian sun. That gives a whole new level, doesn't it? Because if there was the water now that there was when it operated, was fully operational, even if the rest of the stuff on the pyramid was not, all intact, if the water level was there, we would really know. I mean, it would be obvious what the functions were, to some extent anyway. And it would have been to these children of Egypt, as if the water table had remained where it had been originally. So I continue. So I asked, what did the original temple pyramid of the lion look like? Thoth states, a brilliance of the sun with its satellites Hermes, Rasha, and Zunatis. X-N-U-A-T-I-S. I'm presuming the X is pronounced Zunatis or something like that. I'm not going to try anymore. Clustered about it. So there was the Temple of the Sun with Hermes, Rasha, and Zunatis, I'm going to call it, clustered about it. The 3 smaller pyramids were completely destroyed. through misuse of the energies. The two present pyramids of lesser structure now stand in the places of Hermes and Rasha. Let me turn the page for a moment here. In the age of the false gods, the great temple was gutted as a lion gored by a bull. The capstone was exploded and much of the outer walls destroyed as the energies were converted into heat upon the conductive outer skin of the temple. But before this destruction, the great temple was a virgin priestess among the multitudes. Her walls were of finest moonstone, polished to such a smoothness as to reflect the sunlight like a beacon to the stars. Her magnitude was such that only the initiated, trained in retinal shielding, could look upon her, and thus only the initiated dared to come into the sight of her inscrutable gaze. Well, wow. You have to wonder how such a structure, if it was that brilliant, people living within miles of it might have been interfered with. It's kind of hard to understand that, but possibly they had some kind of barriers or shields up beyond a certain point that would keep that reflection in. I'm thinking, as I'm saying that, I'm kind of seeing it, and Thoth is showing me some kind of invisible area around it, like to make that whole area sort of invisible. We're talking about a long time ago here, And there were many, many periods of time where this pyramid was used in various functions. But I asked for the original, so this is what he's telling me. So also I wanted to say that this about the capstone exploding and then the energies were converted into heat upon the conductive outer skin of the temple. Just recently, that is within the last 2 years, I believe, I came across something that has just been discovered again in the last several years, something on Google, I came across it, talking about the, which is the pyramid, one of the lesser pyramids, the second in line. I can't think of the name of it right now, but not the smallest, but the second one next to the Pyramid of Giza. And they're saying some kind of terrible heat process happened instantly inside the walls. They're finding this, change that had to be humongous heat blast. And this lines up with what this was said right here. But it's talking about the second pyramid and not the Pyramid of Giza or the smaller one. So I'd have to go into that with Thoth, and why is it not evident in the other two, blah, and go into all of that, which I haven't done. But I would say definitely that is some kind of, at least pseudo-proof, that what he's saying here in this 1983 material, at least has some level of verification with that, what I read recently, that's only been recently discovered. So the next question in 1983. It is generally accepted in esoteric circles that the capstone to the pyramid still exists, yet you say that it was exploded. Please explain. The physical capstone was destroyed. The energy characters or vectors which gave the capstone power are preserved on golden shields in circuitry impressions. So it's like a computer. You take out the memory things, I don't know what you call them, but little circuitry boards. I think that's it. Circuitry boards, yes. And if you have the circuitry boards, you can build another computer around it, and you put the same circuitry boards back in. So I would assume it's the same. It even says golden shields in circuitry impressions. What is the purpose? What was the purpose of the Great Pyramid and its satellite pyramids? Its purposes were and are many. Its main function is as a conductor, translator of energies, both earth and stellar, in reassembling creation grids for the measuring, maintenance, and regeneration of the earth as a divine temple within the vault of universal dominions. The details of this divine plan cannot be disclosed at this time. And then I say, in my book, Red Tree, I say that the Great Pyramid was built by an ancient order, later to become the Essenes. Was I wrong in this statement? I, as Thoth, Master Initiate, was the educator of this ancient order in the last days of Atlantis. Thus, it was their skilled labor that built the Great Pyramid under my guidance and authority. In later ages, they would continue to rebuild and repair the original construction despite their diminishing knowledge of the sciences involved. What is the purpose of the stone box in the Queen's chamber? It serves as an isolator cell, a resonating cavity for transformation of molecular systems. It can be activated on various levels of performance, from transmuting metals to transferring biosystems from place to place. It can also be used for astral traveling, time projection, etc. However, the stone box as it now exists is incomplete. There was originally an outer casing over it and a control center consisting of a gold and nickel box, a small computer built into a serpent-headed ornament attached to the outer casing. This casing was of gold and lapis, inset with emerald and diamond gems, faceted to achieve energy functions. Along the top of the outer casing, the lid of the box, was a serpent's body in relief. It was within this body that most of the jewels were positioned. In the center of the serpent column was a hollow crystal tube attached to the head of the serpent, winding with the body to the tail that was divided into 3 golden feathers with rattles along the quills. These rattles were high resonance crystals. There are features within the entire system called the orpha that cannot be revealed now. Yet it can be stated that this system, of which the remaining stone box was the matrix component, was a transforming element operating on subatomic particle energy. Well, it's interesting that I only ask about the Queen's box. What about the King's? You know, I don't know why I ignored it and didn't ask about it. And I would really like to know, because when Thoth guided our journey into Egypt, Path of Horus, in 1997, we were told to bypass the Queen's chamber and go directly into the King's, which we did. We had those incredible experiences in there. So obviously the King's chamber is just as souped up. It was fantastic as well, you know, but I didn't ask for the description of the King's chamber. So I didn't get it. So we'll just continue here. We will continue here. Okay, the next question: are there other repositories of equal importance on the surface Earth? My question would include subterranean vaults, although I do not refer to those deep in the Earth or in the central cavity. There are several repositories of great importance. It is difficult to determine the word equal as it is used in this context, for each repository containing ancient records intended for future revelation have their own essentiality in the karma, and I would imagine dharma, of the world, and bear a unique seal upon the divine records. Very generally, I ask, what are some of the major repositories located? Where are they located? Near Lake Titicaca, on the Altiplano Plateau in Peru, Bolivia, Lhasa, Tibetan Plateau, Four Corners, USA, Wasatch Mountains, Salt Lake City region, Utah, Mount Shasta, California, Teton Mountains, Wyoming, Maui, Hawaii. There are other repositories throughout the world, where he doesn't mention San Luis Valley Crestone here, but that obviously they are here. But that was for a future time. He wasn't going to bring that into the conversation here. And I know his MO, how he works, and because it's so big, he would not have brought it into the conversation yet. That had to unfold in the way it unfolded in my personal experience without ever having been touched upon before in my mind. Are there accessible repositories within the submerged Atlantis? There are two regions in the Atlantic where these records may be found. One is in the area of the Bimini Islands, the other near the Yucatan Peninsula. The latter was submerged antecedent to the former. There is also a third in the Atlantic, but it is not a repository in the same sense as the others we are discussing here. It is a fallen temple that had been taken over in the last days of Atlantis by the false priests. Yet within it are sacred records of a specific kind. The temple will one day receive purification and be restored, the records freed from darkness. In a reading given by the sleeping prophet Edgar Cayce, this is my question, he states that the three will come together. No, let me start over. In a reading given by the sleeping prophet Edgar Cayce, he states that three will come to uncover the records near the Sphinx. Could you lend further insight into this? The three shall bear the insignias of the lion, the falcon, and the bull. The color rays shall be respectively red lion, blue falcon, and yellow bull. Each shall have inborn for this purpose an archetypal key to the Hall of Records. When he says inborn, I'm receiving now DNA. Together they will open the door when Libra resides with Mercury in the 12th house. Is that even astrologically possible? I don't know because I'm not an astrologer. My question, on page 92 of the book, The Hall of Records by Jalhandras, is found a prophecy of Hermes given in an ancient writing called Treatise on Initiations. This prophecy states that in a future age, again, a chorus, that in a future age, now this is a quote from this Treatise on Initiations from the Hall of Records, from Jalhandras is quoting this treatise on initiations. That's said to have been written or brought through by Hermes, Thoth. This prophecy states that in a future age, and now I'm quoting from this treatise, again a chorus of praise and of blessing shall celebrate him who has created and redeemed so beautiful a work. This rebirth of the world, this restoration of all good things, this holy and sacred rehabilitation of nature will take place when the time shall come, which is appointed by the divine, ever eternal will of God, without beginning and always the same, and those to whom it shall be given to dominate the earth shall be sent forth and established at the extremity of Egypt, a place built toward the west, whither by sea and by land shall flow all of the race of mortals. They shall be established in a great community upon the Libyan hill, unquote. And I ask those, is this prophecy true? Prophecy of yours? Is this a true prophecy of yours? And is the above a fairly accurate translation of your original text? Thoth replies that indeed it is a prophecy of his, and he states that as it is above given is accurate except for the following corrections. And those to whom it shall be given to dominate should be written, and those to whom it shall be given to dominion over the earth. Turning a page here, sorry. It's an old book, so it's going to be crackling. Here we go. Also, the line, shall flow all the races of mortals, was written in the original text, shall flow, or was given through the original text, shall flow those from all the race of mortals. Now, I don't even ask for what it really means, which would be interesting, because I feel, as I'm reading it now, a holy and sacred rehabilitation of nature shall take place. I almost want to say it's speaking about the new earth, but there are certain things about it that tell me perhaps not. And as I'm saying this, I'm realizing that it is in some way connected to the Pyramidus radius matrix, that in-between state that Thoth speaks of. I'm not going to try to go into it further right now, but it's interesting that I didn't even ask for that here. Okay, so the next is, please give a brief statement of Akhenaten's relation to Moses and the Ark of the Covenant. I'm pausing for a moment because I don't even, this is a little off topic of what we have here, and it goes into a lot. So I don't think I'm going to put that in this particular. This could go into something else. So I'm going to move down because it returns to the Sphinx, and that's more on topic here. How long ago was the Sphinx built? By whom and for what purpose? It was constructed by the same time, at the same time, as the great temple Giza, but it appears with greater age, as it has not been repaired to the same extent. The Sphinx might be compared to a computer console for the great temple, which is also a great cosmic earth computer. The question, in the age when you lived as Thoth Hermes on the earth, actually Repositories of Afra, who were those master initiates who worked with you? So I was asking here specifically of Repositories of Afra, targeting that entity. See, as I said, at the time I didn't know about Thoth Muzuru, but because I said Repositories of Afra, that's what he's targeting here. My father and mother, sister Lhasa, brother-in-law Ta, my son Thoth, several other of my children, a nephew. There are many throughout a time span of 300 years in which I lived upon the surface earth as Repositories. Many were my relations, as our work was bound to the site brought through genetic origin. Now, he doesn't mention his other sister here because apparently she was not that involved. In the text that I did write that mentions her, she seems to be kind of like, well, you know, it's okay, they can do what they want, but I'm really not going to be involved in that. We always have one in the family, right? Or maybe several. So we go on to the next question. That might take me off into another area. I'm going to put this on pause for just a moment so I can take a look at this. Some of the pieces I'm skipping would require so much current explanation and updating that I'm just not going there because they could be brought in another time for another thing. But so I'm going to skip down to one that doesn't require so much explanation, and it is the Shroud of Turin the actual linen of his burial shroud? Now, I know it kind of goes off topic of Egypt, but it is so interesting and it in a way ties in. So here we go. Is the Shroud of Turin the actual linen of his burial shroud? So this is the cloth of the miraculous transformation of the Christ of Yeshua, resurrected through the light of the sapphire. That's SAF-FIRE. This is that particular energy that, well, it's a whole, we could go off topic on that too, but it's a special kind of regenerative energy. It's with the earth, it's in the mount of sapphire in the inner earth. There are records in the Yucatan which in a future time shall be found, attesting to the resurrection of Christ and the veracity of the Turin Shroud. I ask him to further comment on it, and he says, upon the journey of the resurrected Christ to the Yucatan, he left this account. It was written in an ancient lost language by a great shaman of the temple of the city of EXCIUSIVE, a city now lost to the centuries within the voracious growth of the jungle. I quote from this accounting, and here's the quote. And so Habar, which is the entity that is Jesus, who lay in the sleep, came into the great ones of old, and they communed with him. Habar was anointed by the serpent's tongue. His lungs were blown with the serpent's breath, and his flesh was made transparent as the crystal stone. Passed he outward from the death veil, his body illuminate with the power of the seven thunders. And that's the end of the whole communication with Thoth on all of that. Now, this whole thing with the serpent, I really don't want to get into it big time here, but so much has been mentioned. We see the serpent mentioned in the construction of the queen's chamber box, and we see the serpent here. And of course, we know about the feathered serpent. We see in the chamber of the queen's box, you know, the chamber of the queen, we have those little feathers coming out of the end of the serpent with those electrodes or whatever they are on the end of it. And of course, we know about the feathered serpent Quetzalcoatl, which Thoth says he was one of the layered souls of. Here we have the serpent again. And, you know, those who now follow the whole thing about the Anunnakis and the reptilians and all of that would say, oh my God, well, this proves this was all created by the Anunnaki. And it was not. It has nothing to do with the Anunnaki. The Anunnaki, as far as I know, were entirely serpent beings anyway. But they utilize some of the same energy forces. Anyway, what it has to do with is the true serpentine energy, the dragon lord energy of the planet and the universe. This is a whole nother topic. I'm not going to go into it here, but it's not fallen. It's not the little Lizzie beings that are doing bad things on the planet. It's none of that. It's a whole nother beautiful orchestrated energy function of the universe. And it's brought into symbolic representation as serpent and dragon. And that is what it's talking about here. The difficulty with the separation of the two gardens, as I call it, the two fields of consciousness, or Thoth calls it rather, on this planet, is we have the illumined path of the Solarians, and we have the fallen realm that has to do with the Anunnaki and nefarious beings. And there are points that contain similar symbology, but they represent different factors. And the whole history of these two histories in mythology, in texts of the Assyrians, in other forms, in biblical text, gets all mushed together like two pieces of chewing gum that you just put together. And how can you separate them out again? You know, they've been so coalesced as to one thing. So this is very confusing, because as we're waking up now and we're recognizing that there were these bad guys and all of this, it's like all of the texts are being brought over to that side, and that's not the way it is, according to what I received from Thoth. And this is really important. If you want to hear more about it, you can. Those who are in my portal members can go to, well, all of you would be portal members if you're listening to this, because it's for the portal. You can go to my video series. You can find it in the portal page on the videos. What's it called now? The Two Gardens and the Tree of Life. And it explains at least some of it that I'm talking about here. So this ends the first video on this series of the Great Pyramid and the Hall of Records. The second video is much shorter, and it goes into some visions I had that have to do with this topic of the Great Pyramid and the Hall of Records. So here we conclude the first one. Thank you for listening.